Understanding logical fallacies today, and specifically analyzing logical fallacies in arguments. So as a reminder, what are logical fallacies? They are errors in reasoning that weaken your argument. Why do we care about finding them? Because they mislead you or the audience, and they make the audience create false conclusions, or they manipulate people's emotions rather than actually using evidence. So an example is, if we allow one exception, soon everyone will expect one. Slippery slope. Now, why do they undermine credibility? It's because arguments relying on faulty logic lose it. Like, there is none, because it just shows they have no evidence. So for example, in the last scene that we read, Cassius said, "How many ages hence shall this our lofty scene be acted over in states unborn and accents yet unknown?" That's bandwagoning, because they had just murdered Caesar, and he was saying everybody in the future is gonna say that it was a good idea that we just killed him. And so then the impact of that means that everybody assumes future popularity proves present righteousness, meaning it was okay that they did it because everybody else thinks it's okay, and there's not actually any evidence for that. And so fallacy shift focused from solid reasoning to manipulation rather than using evidence. So example, last time he said, "If then that friend demand why Brutus rose against Caesar." So this is an either or false dilemma. It's presenting only two options. You either love Caesar or you have to kill him. There's a lot of other options in between there, right? And Brutus was just oversimplifying it, and he wasn't using actual logic. And that ignores the other solutions, like we said, and it's limiting Caesar's power. So it also will create weak comparisons, because they rely on flawed assumptions rather than logic. So Brutus said, "Had you rather Caesar were living and die all slaves?" That's slippery slope, because he's saying, or even fear tactic, because he's saying, if you let Caesar live, then all of us are going to be slaves. That's what will happen. But he ignores the possibility of Caesar ruling without all of them becoming slaves, and he never provided evidence that that would happen. And so they rely on emotional manipulation. Remember that. Do not use logical evidence. And again, this is an example. With this I depart that as I slew my best lover. And this appeals to emotions rather than factual justification, and it distracted from logical reasonings about Caesar's threat. Brutus is just saying, "Well, I loved him and I feel really bad that I killed him because he was like my brother," but then never once is giving any reason as to why Caesar was actually a threat. So what does make an argument valid? An argument is valid if it has logical connections that can help you draw a conclusion or come up to an idea that everybody agrees on. It avoids logical fallacies that weaken the reasoning, and it uses evidence properly rather than making assumptions. And we need to identify the different fallacies, because if we don't identify the different fallacies, then we're not going to be able to tell whether somebody is actually using real evidence or not. And so today, when you work on the assignment, it looks like this. You are going to be doing it on paper or on your computer if you're at home, but you are basically going to be analyzing the logical fallacies in Julius Caesar Act 3, Scene 2. And you are going to tell me which character said it. You're going to tell me the logical fallacy it is. You're going to give me the quote from the William Shakespeare version. And then you are going to explain why that is a logical fallacy. So for example, the first one that I used was scare tactic. And the character that said it was Brutus. And it said, "Who is here so base that would be a bondman? If any speak for him, have I offended?" And the reason that this is a logical fallacy is because Brutus is saying that disagreeing with him means you want to be a slave. This uses fear to stop the argument rather than using evidence to explain why Caesar was bad for Rome. And then the next part that we are going to look at is analyzing the argument's structure. So you are going to again identify the character, the quote, and then you're going to break down their arguments. You're going to tell me their claim, which is what they are actually arguing, and then you are going to tell me the evidence for their argument, and then you are going to give me the reasoning. So for example, I picked Antony, and he said, "You all did love him once, not without cause. What cause withholds you then to mourn for him?" So his argument is, you all loved Rome, or you all love Caesar, and so you should mourn for him now. And his evidence is that the people previously admired him and supported Caesar. And the reasoning is, if they loved Caesar before, they should still feel loyalty and grief for him now. Their lack of mourning suggests that they have been misled or manipulated. This is an actual argument, and even though he's not saying this scientist said, he's using logic to say, hey, you all loved Caesar, and now all of a sudden you're just forgetting him. And it could also be seen as bandwagoning, because he's kind of pressuring the crowd by appealing to their false support, because maybe they got evidence from Brutus that they were like, oh yeah, I want to change my mind, and which we're all allowed to do, right? So he's implying that since they followed him, they must continue to love Caesar and they can't change their mind. And this ignores the possibility that they maybe have valid reasons. So it can be both. There can be fallacies in an argument and it can still be strong, but I need you guys to recognize the difference. So if you have any questions, you can email me and let me know.